The grand chamber floated in the darkness of space, suspended between two burning suns. Inside the massive structure, representatives from 847 different species gathered for what they believed would be a simple vote. The air processors worked overtime to maintain the various atmospheric requirements, creating visible layers of different gases throughout the enormous room. Ambassador Velkoth stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as holographic images appeared above the assembly. His scales reflected the light from countless screens, making him appear almost golden. He had prepared this presentation for 3 months, gathering every piece of evidence he could find about the species called humans. Honored members of the council, Velkoth began, his voice translator carrying his words to every corner of the chamber. We face a growing threat that can no longer be ignored. The humans of Earth have violated 17 quarantine protocols in the last decade alone. The first hologram showed a blue and green planet, third from a yellow star. Earth looked peaceful from orbit, swirled with white clouds and vast oceans, but Velkoth quickly changed the image to show human expansion through their local space. 200 years ago, these creatures achieved basic space travel, he continued. In that short time, they have spread to 23 star systems. They ignore our warnings. They refuse to acknowledge council authority. They establish colonies without permission and extract resources as if the galaxy belongs to them alone. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. 200 years was nothing in galactic terms. Most species took thousands of years to expand beyond their home systems. The Zathrians themselves had taken 4,000 years to colonize just 12 systems, and they were considered aggressive by council standards. A representative from the Pelian Collective raised one of her 6 tentacles. What is their technological level? Surely they cannot pose a real threat to council members. Velkoth smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Exactly my point. They possess primitive, faster-than-light drives, barely capable of crossing 10 light-years in a month. Their weapons are basic plasma cannons and chemical explosives. They have no neural network technology, no quantum communication, no graviton shields. By every measure, they are centuries behind even the youngest council species. More holograms appeared, showing human ships. They looked crude and blocky, covered in odd protrusions and painted with garish colors and symbols. Some had words written on their hulls in human languages. One ship was named Indomitable. Another was called Remember the Alamo. The council members laughed at the primitive designs. Their military vessels are little more than metal boxes with engines, Velkoth said dismissively. Their largest ship carries fewer than 1,000 individuals. Their weapons would barely scratch our shields. From the back of the chamber, a figure in dark robes stood slowly. The laughter died away. Observer Kale rarely spoke at council sessions, and when he did, wise members listened. The observers were an ancient order, dedicated to studying and understanding all species in the galaxy. Ambassador Velkoth, Kale said, his voice quiet but clear. Have you studied human history? Have you examined their cultural development? Velkoth's scales rippled with irritation. I have examined what matters, observer. Their technology, their military capability, their expansion rate. These are the facts that concern us. But not their nature, Kale pressed. Not their psychology, their motivations, their responses to threats. Their nature is irrelevant, Velkoth snapped. They are primitives who refuse to follow council law. That is all we need to know. Kale remained standing for a moment longer, then slowly sat down. He pulled his robes tighter around himself, as if suddenly cold despite the climate control. Council matriarch Selin, who had led the council for 3 centuries, raised her hand for silence. Her species, the Valendi, were known for their logical approach to governance. She had seen dozens of species join the council, and several disciplined for breaking the rules. The council has been patient with humanity, she said. We have sent diplomatic missions. We have transmitted our laws in their languages. We have offered them a path to membership if they would simply follow proper procedures. They have ignored us at every turn. She gestured and new images appeared. These showed human colonies on worlds the council had marked for preservation. Mining operations on asteroids claimed by other species. Human ships exploring regions of space designated as restricted zones. They take what they want and ask forgiveness later, if they bother to ask at all, Selin continued. Some have called them curious and adventurous. I call them reckless and dangerous. If we do not act now, what message does that send to the 847 species who follow our laws? The chamber erupted in agreement. Representatives clicked, buzzed, chirped, and spoke in hundreds of languages, all translated instantly. The consensus was clear. Humanity had to be stopped. "I propose a military intervention," Velkoth said, raising his voice above the noise. "Not an extermination. We are not barbarians, but a corrective action. We destroy their military capability, occupy their colony worlds, and bring them under council supervision until they learn to behave properly." "Seconded," called out a voice from the Kralix Dominion section. Admiral Thexnar stood, his massive form towering over the nearby delegates. The Kralix were warriors, one of the few species the Council trusted with military operations. Their third fleet had conquered 40 systems for the Council over the centuries, and they had never lost a battle. "The third fleet can handle this pest control operation," Thexnar said confidently. "Give us 3 months and we will have every human colony under occupation. 6 months and Earth itself will be secured. It will be a simple operation." Matriarch Seelan nodded. "Then let us vote. All those in favor of authorizing military action against humanity?" The chamber lit up with affirmative signals. Lights, sounds, and projected symbols of agreement filled the space. The holographic display counted the votes, numbers climbing rapidly. 782 votes in favor. Only 65 opposed. The measure passed overwhelmingly. "It is decided," Seelan announced. "Admiral Thexnar, you have council authorization to proceed. Use the minimum force necessary. Remember, we seek to educate these humans, not exterminate them." "As you command, Matriarch," Thexnar replied, but his tone suggested he found the distinction amusing. As the council members began to file out, discussing the vote and already moving on to other matters, Observer Kale sat alone in his section. He had accessed the human data files during the debate, reading through historical records that the council had dismissed as irrelevant. Humans had been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. 10,000 years of continuous conflict. They had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and diseases that killed millions. They had built weapons capable of destroying their own planet, then chosen not to use them. They had reached their own moon using computers less powerful than a council child's toy. Kale read one human quotation that made his blood run cold. A human general from their Second World War had said, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." Another human saying troubled him even more. "We sleep soundly in our beds because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who would do us harm." These were not the words of a peaceful species that would surrender when faced with superior force. These were the words of survivors, of fighters, of a species that had clawed its way to the top of their planet's food chain through sheer determination. Kale tried to access more files, but the vote was finished. The decision was made. He could only watch now and hope he was wrong. In orbit above Nexus Prime, Admiral Thexnar boarded his flagship, the Inexorable. His crew stood at attention as he entered the command bridge. "Set course for the Sol system," he ordered. "Maximum cruise speed." "I want to get this over with quickly." "Yes, Admiral," his second-in-command replied. "Should we prepare invasion protocols?" Thexnar laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Invasion protocols? For primitives who still use chemical rockets? No, prepare pest control protocols. This will not be a battle. It will be an extermination of an annoyance." The Inexorable's engines flared to life, and the third fleet of the Kralix Dominion began its journey toward Earth. 14,000 warriors, 300 ships, and enough firepower to level a planet, all heading toward a species they knew nothing about, armed with confidence born of 8 centuries without defeat. Behind them, Observer Kyle watched the fleet depart through a viewing port. He whispered a prayer to the ancient gods his people no longer believed in. "May they be as weak as we hope," he said to the empty observation deck, "because if they are not, we have just made a terrible mistake." The bridge of the Inexorable hummed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Thexnar reviewed the tactical display. 3 weeks of travel had brought the third fleet to the edge of the Sol system, and what he saw there made him even more confident than before. The human defense force consisted of perhaps 60 ships, scattered across their system in a pathetic attempt at a defensive perimeter. Most clustered around the fourth planet, the red one they called Mars. Others protected the orbital stations above Earth itself. A few brave or foolish vessels had positioned themselves between the Kralix fleet and the inner planets. Their largest ship has a mass of only 40,000 tons, his tactical officer reported. Our smallest destroyer masses twice that. The Inexorable alone outweighs their entire fleet. Thexnar studied the human vessels through the long-range sensors. They were indeed primitive, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. He could see obvious weak points in their designs, places where armor was thin or weapon systems were poorly placed. Some of the ships looked ancient, probably museum pieces pressed into emergency service. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let us offer them the chance to surrender with dignity. The communication officer worked his console, establishing a link. After a moment, a human face appeared on the main screen. It was a female, with dark hair tied back and eyes that held no fear. She wore a military uniform with insignia that identified her as a senior officer. I am Admiral Thexnar of the Kralix Dominion, acting under the authority of the Galactic Council, he began, speaking slowly so the translator could keep pace. You have violated Council law repeatedly. We are here to restore order. You have 24 hours to power down your vessels, evacuate your military stations, and prepare for occupation. If you comply, no harm will come to your civilian population. The human woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her translator had a strange quality to it, something almost like amusement. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your council's messages. We chose to ignore them. This is our space, our home, and you were not invited here. Thexnar felt his temper rising. You believe 60 primitive ships can stand against my fleet? I have 300 warships, each more advanced than anything you possess. I have 14,000 warriors who have never known defeat. You cannot win. Accept the logic of the situation. Logic, Chen repeated. You want us to surrender because it is logical. You want us to give up our homes because you say we broke your laws. You want us to accept occupation because we cannot win. She leaned forward and her eyes were hard as stone. Admiral, you clearly do not know anything about humans. We do not surrender, ever. Not when the odds are against us. Not when victory seems impossible. And especially not when someone comes to our home and threatens our families. Then you choose death, Thexnar said flatly. No, Chen replied. We choose to fight. There is a difference. The communication cut off. Thexnar stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his officers. Clearly they need a demonstration. Target their orbital stations around the fourth planet. Fire when ready. But before his weapons officer could comply, the tactical display lit up with warnings. The human ships were moving and moving fast. They had been scattered across the system, but now they began converging, using trajectories that made no sense. Sir, they are not forming a defensive line, his tactical officer said, confusion in his voice. They are spreading out, taking individual vectors. I cannot predict their formation. It does not matter what formation they take, Thexnar said. They cannot hurt us. All ships advance. Weapons free. Show them the cost of defiance. The Kralix fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of military might that had broken dozens of species. The human ships came at them from multiple angles, their engines burning at maximum thrust. The first human ship to reach weapons range was a destroyer called the Defiant. It launched missiles toward the Kralix line, small chemical rockets that would barely scratch their shields. The Kralix point defense systems shot down 90% of them. The few that got through exploded harmlessly against energy barriers, but the Defiant did not turn away. It kept coming directly at a Kralix heavy cruiser. What is it doing? Thexnar muttered. The answer came seconds later. The Defiant, damaged and leaking atmosphere, rammed directly into the cruiser at full speed. The impact destroyed both ships instantly, creating a debris field that scattered across space. Report, Thexnar roared. The cruiser Relentless is gone, sir. Complete destruction. The human ship deliberately collided with us. Before Thexnar could respond, it happened again. Another human ship, this one called Revenge, absorbed enough damage to cripple it, then threw all power to engines and crashed into a Kralix destroyer. Both ships exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. They are insane, his second-in-command whispered. They are desperate, Thexnar corrected. Titan formation. Do not let them close the distance. But the humans had already adapted their tactics. Ships that were too damaged to continue fighting did not retreat. Instead, they became weapons themselves, ramming, self-destructing, or using their last moments to shield other human vessels. Every human ship that died took at least one Kralix vessel with it. The battle spread across the system. Human ships used the planets and moons for cover, appearing from behind asteroids or gas giants to launch surprise attacks. They employed chemical weapons, nuclear explosives, and kinetic kill vehicles. Nothing they used was sophisticated, but all of it was effective at close range, and the humans were willing to get very close. After 6 hours of combat, Thexanar looked at his casualty reports with growing disbelief. He had lost 43 ships. The humans had lost all 60, but they had made him pay for every single one. "Begin landing operations on the 4th planet," he ordered. "If their fleet is this troublesome, we will strike at their colonies directly. They will surrender once they see their cities burning." The Kralix troop carriers descended through the thin Martian atmosphere. The colony below was large for human standards, home to perhaps 200,000 people. Most should have been civilians. Intelligence said the colony had only a small security force, maybe a few hundred armed guards. The first transport touched down near the colony's central dome. Kralix warriors poured out, weapons ready, expecting frightened civilians. Instead, they found prepared defenders. Every human colonist who could hold a weapon was armed. They fought from inside buildings, from tunnels, from behind improvised barricades. When they ran out of bullets, they used explosives. When they ran out of explosives, they used rocks and metal bars. Lieutenant Kresh led his squad through the colony streets, taking fire from every direction. They are all armed, even the females and the young ones old enough to lift a weapon. His squad made it to a residential building and breached the door. Inside, they found a human female with gray hair, probably elderly by their standards. She was supposed to run, supposed to hide. Instead, she fired a shotgun at point-blank range, killing one warrior before the others gunned her down. Kresh stood over her body, breathing hard. "What is wrong with these people?" He asked no one in particular. His answer came from a speaker somewhere in the building, a human voice, male and young, speaking calmly. "You came to our home. You threatened our families. What did you think would happen?" The fighting on Mars lasted 3 days. The Kralix took the colony, but they had expected to lose perhaps a dozen warriors in the operation. Instead, they lost over 800. Every building was contested. Every street was a battlefield. The humans surrendered only when they physically could not fight anymore. And even then, some chose death over capture. On the Inexorable, Admiral Thexanar received reports from across the system. Human resistance was fiercer than anyone had predicted. Their small fleet was destroyed, yes, but the cost had been severe. 1/7 of his fleet was gone or too damaged to continue fighting, and now Earth was responding. The planet had remained quiet during the initial battle, evacuating civilians and preparing defenses. Now dozens of new ships were launching from orbital facilities. These were not military vessels. They were merchant ships, mining haulers, even passenger liners. All had been fitted with weapons, armored with whatever materials were available, and crewed by volunteers. A message came through from Earth itself, broadcast on all frequencies so every ship in both fleets would hear it. The voice was that of an old human male, someone identified as the Secretary General of Earth. "To all human vessels, stations and colonies," the Secretary General said, and his voice was steady despite the circumstances. "We did not want this war. We sought only to live in peace and explore the stars that have called to us since we first looked up at the night sky. But the Council has decided we are criminals for following that dream. They have sent their warriors to subjugate us, to make us kneel." There was a pause. "So I say this to every human who can hear my voice. Hold nothing back. Show them what we are. Show them that humanity does not kneel. Show them that we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. And show them that if they want Earth, they will have to pry it from our cold, dead hands." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called 6 weeks after the invasion began. Matriarch Selen sat in her chair with growing unease as she read the reports from Admiral Thexanar. The numbers did not make sense. They could not be real. "The Third Fleet has sustained 60% casualties," Ambassador Velkoth read aloud, his voice shaking slightly. 180 ships destroyed or too damaged to continue combat operations. Casualties among ground forces exceed 40%. Human resistance shows no signs of weakening. Request immediate reinforcement." The chamber was silent. No one had expected these words. The Kralix Third Fleet had never lost more than 10% casualties in any campaign. 60% was unthinkable. "How is this possible?" demanded the representative from the Pelian Collective. They are primitives. You said yourself their technology was centuries behind ours. Their technology has not defeated us, Velkuth said, reading from the report. Their tactics and determination have. They refuse to acknowledge when they are beaten. Ships that should retreat instead attack. Soldiers who should surrender instead fight to the death. Civilians act as combatants. Every colony, every station, every vessel becomes a fortress that must be taken at terrible cost. Observer Kyle stood slowly. Perhaps now the council will listen to what I tried to explain before the vote. The humans are not like us. They do not think like us. Explain, Matriarch Seelan ordered. Kale moved to the center of the chamber and holographic displays appeared around him. These showed not human ships or weapons, but something more fundamental. Human biology, human history, human psychology. Look at their planet, Kale said. And Earth appeared above them. We see a beautiful world peaceful from space. But examine the surface more closely. Earth is what we classify as a Class 7 death world. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Death worlds were rare. Planets where life was so competitive and dangerous that intelligent species almost never evolved there. They were places where everything was trying to kill everything else. The gravity is 1.2 times galactic standard, Kyle continued. Most species would struggle to move there. Humans evolved under those conditions. Their bones are denser, their muscles stronger. They can run for hours without stopping. They can heal from injuries that would kill most species. New images appeared showing Earth's predators. Tigers, bears, crocodiles, sharks, creatures that existed solely to hunt and kill. Humans evolved alongside these creatures, Cal said. They did not have claws or fangs or venom. They had brains and determination. They learned to make weapons, to cooperate, to hunt animals larger and stronger than themselves. They became persistent predators. They would chase prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They learned that if they never gave up, they would eventually win. The next image showed human eyes. 2 eyes facing forward like a predator. Notice their eye placement, Kale said. Front-facing eyes provide depth perception. Only predators have front-facing eyes. Prey species have eyes on the sides of their heads to watch for danger. Humans have predator eyes because they are predators. Even now, even after thousands of years of civilization, they are built to hunt. More holograms appeared showing human history. Wars stretching back thousands of years. Empires rising and falling. Weapons growing more sophisticated. From stone axes to atomic bombs. They have been at war with each other for their entire existence, Kale explained. They know nothing else. Peace for humans is simply the time between wars. They have destroyed entire cities, killed millions of their own kind and kept fighting. They created weapons that could end all life on their planet. And the only thing that stopped them from using those weapons was the fear that both sides would die. A human saying appeared in text, translated into council standard. I have not yet begun to fight. That was said by one of their naval commanders when his ship was sinking and his enemies demanded his surrender, Kale said. His vessel was on fire. Half his crew was dead and he was clearly defeated. So he said he had not yet begun to fight. Then he won the battle. Another saying appeared. Surrender is not in our vocabulary. They mean it literally, Kale said. When humans say they will never surrender, they are not posturing. They are stating a simple fact about their nature. The chamber remained quiet as Kale continued his presentation. He showed how humans had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and diseases. He showed how they had gone from primitive tribes to spacefaring civilization in just 10,000 years, a fraction of the time it took most species. But here is what truly makes them dangerous, Kyle said, and his voice dropped lower. They adapt faster than any species we have ever encountered. They learn from every battle. They study their enemies and find weaknesses. And they share information instantly across their entire species. He displayed recent combat reports from Admiral Thexnar. In the first battle, humans used ramming tactics. By the second battle, they had analyzed Kralix's shield frequencies and modified their weapons accordingly. By the third battle, they were using captured Kralix equipment. They learn and evolve during the war itself. Matriarch Seelan leaned forward. You are saying they are becoming more dangerous as the war continues? I am saying they have not yet shown us their full capability, Kyle replied. Everything we have seen is them fighting with peacetime military forces and improvised weapons. Their industrial capacity is designed for commerce and expansion, not war production. If they fully convert to a war economy, as their history suggests they can do with frightening speed, they could produce weapons and ships at rates we cannot match. Velkoth slammed his fist on his console. This is fear-mongering. They are still primitives with primitive technology, are they? Kale challenged. He displayed new intelligence. We thought they had no artificial intelligence because AI is banned by council law. We were wrong. They have AI. They have had it for decades. They simply did not tell us. They also have been developing biological enhancements, genetic engineering, and weapon systems that violate multiple council conventions. They knew our laws and chose to develop forbidden technology anyway, because they knew they might need it someday. The revelation sent shockwaves through the council. If humans were willing to violate fundamental laws before any conflict began, what would they do now that war had started? Kale continued, now showing reports from Kralik soldiers who had fought humans on the ground. The psychological reports are disturbing. Kralik's warriors, some of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, are requesting to be relieved from combat duty. They report that fighting humans is unlike anything they have experienced. One report appeared in full, written by Lieutenant Kresh after the battle for Mars colony. Kale read it aloud. They do not fear death. When surrounded and out of ammunition, they charge with knives and improvised weapons. When injured, they continue fighting. I witnessed a human female with a broken leg drag herself toward my position while firing a weapon. When her weapon ran out of ammunition, she threw rocks at us. When we finally rendered her unconscious, we found 17 separate wounds that should have incapacitated her. She had continued fighting through all of them. Another report from a different battle. Human soldiers sing while attacking. They chant phrases from their history. Names of battles, names of heroes, words that seem to give them strength. One group charged our position while singing something called the Marines' Hymn. They all died, but they died on their feet, weapons firing until the last moment. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This was not how civilized species fought wars. This was something primal, something savage. There is more, Kyle said grimly. Admiral Thexnar reports that humans are now using psychological warfare against his troops. They broadcast messages on Kralik's frequencies. They tell the warriors stories about human history, about battles where humans were outnumbered and won anyway. They describe in detail what humans do to enemies who threaten their homeworld. The messages are having an effect. Morale among Kralik's troops is declining. One such message was played for the council, a human voice calm and matter-of-fact speaking in translated Kraliks. To the Kralik soldiers fighting in the Sol system, we know you are just following orders. We know you were told this would be easy. But you should know some things about us. We have a saying, come and take them. It means we will never give up our weapons or our freedom. Another saying, do not fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. We did not start this war. You came to our home. You threatened our families. So understand this. We will fight you on every world, in every system, in every corridor and street. We will fight until you leave or until we are all dead. There is no third option. No surrender, no negotiation, only victory or death. Choose wisely how long you wish to continue this war. Matriarch Selen looked pale. What do you recommend, Observer Kale? Immediate withdrawal, Kale said without hesitation. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. We measured human civilization by its age, rather than by the nature of the species themselves. They are 200 years into space travel, yes, but they are 10,000 years into warfare. They know how to fight, how to suffer, how to keep going when any logical species would quit. If we continue this war, the cost will be... The council chamber was divided now, something that had not happened in centuries. Matriarch Selen could see the fractures forming as she looked across the assembled representatives. Some species demanded immediate withdrawal. Others insisted on escalation. The unity that had authorized the invasion was shattered. We must send reinforcements, Ambassador Velkoth argued, his voice desperate. We have committed ourselves to this course. If we retreat now, it will be seen as surrender. The Council's authority will be destroyed. A representative from the Pelian Collective stood, her tentacles waving angrily. Your pride has already cost us thousands of lives and hundreds of ships. How many more must die before you admit this war was a mistake? It was not a mistake to enforce Council law, Velkoth shot back. It was a mistake to underestimate human resistance. Now that we understand what we face, we can plan accordingly. We need more ships, more soldiers, and a longer timeline. Matriarch Selen raised her hand for silence. She had spent the last week, reading every report from the Sol system, every casualty list, every tactical analysis. The picture they painted was grim, but she agreed with Velkoth on one point. Withdrawal now would be seen as weakness. The Council will authorize reinforcement, she announced. Protests erupted, but she continued. 3 additional fleets will be sent to Sol system. That gives Admiral Thexnar 14,000 warships total. Surely that will be sufficient. Sufficient for what? Observer Kale asked quietly. To defeat them? Or to anger them further? Seelan ignored him. The motion is put to vote. All in favor? This time, the vote was much closer. 437 in favor, 410 opposed. The Council was nearly split down the middle, but the decision was made. The news reached Earth within hours, transmitted by human intelligence networks that had somehow infiltrated Council communication systems. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Unconquered, and read the report with grim satisfaction. They are sending more fleets, her first officer said. 3 more fleets. We are already barely holding on with what we face now. No, Chen corrected. We are winning with what we face now. Every day they stay in our space, they lose ships. Every battle costs them more than it costs us. And now they are committing even more resources to a war they cannot win. She turned to her tactical team. How long until the reinforcements arrive? 3 weeks at their best speed, Captain. Then we have 3 weeks to show them what a mistake this is. Contact all human fleet elements. We are going on the offensive. Across human space, the response was immediate. Ships that had been defending colonies and stations began forming into attack groups. More civilian vessels were converted to warships, a process humans had refined to the point where they could turn a merchant hauler into a fighting ship in less than a week. But the real change was happening on Earth itself, and in the hidden facilities throughout human territory. The industrial capacity that had built colonies across dozens of systems was now focused entirely on one goal, making weapons. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in one of the newly constructed orbital shipyards above Earth. He had been retired teaching naval history at the academy when the war began. Now he commanded the construction effort, and what he saw impressed even him. How many? He asked the facility director. We are currently completing 4 destroyers per week, the director replied. In another month we will be up to 6 per week. We have also begun production of a new design, something we are calling the Vengeance class. Webb looked at the technical specifications. The Vengeance class ships were smaller than traditional warships, barely larger than a corvette. But they were fast, heavily armed for their size, and cheap to build. Most importantly, they were designed to be built quickly, using modular components that could be manufactured at dozens of different facilities. How many can we produce? Current estimates suggest we can build 20 per month once all facilities are online. By the end of the year, possibly 30 per month. Webb did the math in his head. If the war lasted another 6 months, they could add 200 new ships to their fleet. If it lasted a year, 400 ships. The Council had numbers, but humans had something better. They had industrial capacity and the will to use it. He also knew about the other projects, the ones kept secret even from most military personnel. The reverse engineering efforts that had captured Kralix technology and improved upon it. The AI programs that were now coordinating fleet movements with inhuman precision. The biological enhancement programs that were creating soldiers who could survive wounds that would kill normal humans. Humanity was not fighting a defensive war anymore. They were fighting a war of evolution, adapting and changing faster than the Council could respond. The offensive began 2 weeks later. Human fleets struck at Council positions across a dozen systems simultaneously. They used tactics no civilized species would consider. They ambushed supply convoys, destroyed logistics bases, and attacked isolated outposts. They did not seek honorable battle. They sought to hurt the Council as badly as possible. Lieutenant Kresh, who had survived the battle for Mars, found himself stationed at a mining facility in the Dracon system when the humans attacked. The alarms woke him from an exhausted sleep, and he rushed to his battle station. The attacking force consisted of 12 human ships, all converted merchants. They should not have been a threat to the station's defensive weapons and the 3 Kralix destroyers in orbit. But the humans had learned. They are jamming our communications, his commander said, voice tight with stress. I cannot contact the fleet or council command. The human ships spread out, each attacking from a different vector. They used missiles, with unusual warheads, explosives wrapped in radar-reflective material that confused targeting systems. They used lasers at frequencies the Kralix shields were less effective against. They used small kinetic projectiles fired at high velocity, too numerous to shoot down. One destroyer exploded, its reactor breached by a lucky shot. Another was crippled, spinning helplessly with its engines destroyed. The third managed to escape into faster-than-light travel, leaving the station defenseless. The human ships surrounded the facility. A transmission came through, the voice now familiar to Kresh. It was that human female captain, Chen. Dracon facility. You have 2 choices. Evacuate to the planet's surface within 1 hour, or remain on the station and die when we destroy it. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. You have 1 hour. The facility commander looked at his tactical display. There was no way to win. No reinforcements could arrive in time. No weapons could damage the human ships before they destroyed the station. Begin evacuation, he ordered quietly. Kresh and 3,000 other council personnel loaded into escape pods and shuttles, abandoning the mining facility they had held for 5 years. They watched from the planet's surface as the human ships systematically destroyed everything they had built, reducing it to debris. Then the humans transmitted another message. This one broadcast to every council facility within range. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You invaded our space. You attacked our homes. You killed our families. Now we are bringing the war to you. Every council facility, every supply depot, every outpost in range of human ships is now a target. You can leave our space and return to your homes, or you can stay and watch everything you have built turn to ash. The choice is yours. Reports like this flooded into the council chambers. Dozens of facilities destroyed or abandoned. Hundreds of ships damaged or destroyed in ambushes. Supply lines cut. Morale collapsing. And then came the reports that truly frightened the council leadership. Human prisoners were being treated well, fed and given medical care, then released with messages to deliver to their commanders. The messages were all variations on the same theme. One Kralix warrior stood before Admiral Thexnar and delivered the message he had been given. The humans want you to know that they do not hate you. They do not want to kill you. They want you to go home. But if you stay, they will kill every last one of you. They asked me to tell you about something called the Pacific War from their history. The warrior continued, reciting the message he had memorized. In that war, humans fought another group of humans who refused to surrender. The war ended when one side used atomic weapons, destroying 2 entire cities. Hundreds of thousands died instantly. The humans who did this said they would do it again if necessary. They said they would burn every city, kill millions of their own species, to win the war. And when their enemies finally understood this, the war ended. Thexnar sat heavily in his command chair. They used atomic weapons on themselves? Yes, Admiral. They want us to understand that they will do whatever it takes to win. There are no limits they will not cross. No price they will not pay. They are asking you to imagine what they would be willing to do to an enemy species if they were willing to do that to their own kind. When the warrior left, Thexnar sat alone in his quarters and read the casualty reports. 8 months into the war, his forces had been reduced by 70%. 7 out of every 10 ships he had started with were gone. His warriors were exhausted, demoralized, and terrified of facing humans in combat. And soon the reinforcements would arrive. 14,000 fresh ships and crews who had no idea why. The reinforcement fleets arrived at the Sol system in the 10th month of the war. Admiral Thexnar watched on his tactical display as thousands of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, filling the space around his depleted forces. Fresh crews, undamaged vessels, full ammunition stores. It should have filled him with hope. Instead, he felt only dread. Transmit tactical data to all incoming vessels, he ordered. Make sure they understand the threat assessment. His second-in-command hesitated. Sir, Command Authority has sent orders. They want an immediate offensive against Earth itself. They say we now have overwhelming force. Thexnar closed his eyes. The Council still did not understand. They thought numbers would solve the problem. They thought fresh troops would break human resistance. They had learned nothing. Relay the orders, he said quietly, but also relay my recommendations. Any commander who ignores them will learn the hard way. The combined fleet began its advance toward Earth, 14,000 warships moving in formation. It was the largest military force assembled in Council history. Against any other species, it would have guaranteed victory within days. On Earth, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. She watched the sensor readings as the massive fleet approached and allowed herself a small smile. They really did it, her tactical officer said, voice filled with awe and fear. 14,000 ships. How can we possibly stop them? We do not need to stop them, Chen replied. We need to make them understand that stopping us will cost more than they are willing to pay. She turned to her communications team. Send the activation codes, all of it. Everything we have built, everything we have planned, everything we have prepared for this moment. Show them what we are. Across human space, the response was immediate. The shipyards that had been working around the clock for months launched their products. 400 Vengeance-class warships emerged from hiding places behind moons and asteroid fields. In the gas giants' rings, they were joined by converted civilian vessels now numbering in the thousands. But that was not the real surprise. Sir, a Kralik sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. I am detecting weapons platforms. Hundreds of them. They were hidden, powered down. They are coming online now. Admiral Thexnar looked at the display and felt his blood run cold. The humans had seeded their entire solar system with automated defense platforms. Simple designs, essentially just a reactor, a missile launcher, and a basic AI to control it. But there were so many of them. How many? He asked. Estimate 2,000 platforms, sir. Possibly more. They are distributed throughout the system. The defensive preparations were only the beginning. As the Council fleet advanced, they discovered that every piece of infrastructure in the Sol system had been turned into a potential weapon. Civilian stations had been fitted with missiles. Communication satellites carried kinetic kill weapons. Even the mining facilities on asteroids had explosives installed, ready to detonate if Council forces tried to use them. The battle for Earth was unlike anything in the Council's military history. It was not a battle at all. It was a systematic destruction of everything the Council fleet tried to accomplish. They could not secure orbital space because human platforms kept emerging from hiding. They could not land troops because every landing zone was defended by thousands of armed civilians. They could not cut off supplies because the humans had stockpiled years' worth of resources, and the humans kept coming. New ships every week, new weapons every day, new tactics every battle. They adapted faster than the Council could respond. Lieutenant Kresh, who had somehow survived every battle he had been in, found himself in yet another desperate fight. His unit was trying to secure a human military base on the moon, and the resistance was fanatical. They are using children, one of his warriors screamed. Young ones, barely old enough to hold weapons. Kresh looked through his scope and saw it was true. Humans who could not have been more than 15 years old were fighting alongside adults. When he tried to capture one alive to question why children were being sent to fight, the young human detonated an explosive vest, killing himself and 3 Kralix warriors. Kresh sat in the rubble afterward, no longer able to process what he was seeing. These people were insane. They sent their young to die. They turned every civilian into a soldier. They fought with a desperation that made no logical sense because they had already lost. The Council fleet was so much larger, so much more powerful. But the humans did not care about logic. They cared about surviving, about protecting their world, about refusing to kneel. Back in Council space, the chamber was in chaos. 8 months had passed since the reinforcements were sent. The losses were catastrophic. The Council had committed nearly half its total military strength to the invasion of Earth, and it was being ground down day by day. Observer Kale stood once again before the assembly, and this time even Ambassador Velkoth sat silent, his scales dull with defeat. I have completed my comprehensive analysis of humanity, Kale said, and his voice carried to every corner of the silent chamber. With the Council's permission, I would like to share what I have learned. Matriarch Selen nodded, too tired to speak. Kale displayed images of human biology again, but this time he went deeper. Humans produce a chemical called adrenaline when threatened. It makes them stronger, faster, and immune to pain temporarily. They can perform feats of strength that should be impossible. They can ignore injuries that would incapacitate other species. More images appeared. Their brains are wired for warfare. They can make complex strategic decisions in seconds. They can predict enemy movements based on minimal information. They have something they call intuition, a subconscious processing of information that often proves more accurate than logical analysis. He showed human history again. Battles and wars stretching back thousands of years. They have never stopped fighting. Even in times of peace, they prepare for the next war. They study military history like we study art. They glorify their warriors in stories and songs. They build monuments to their wars and teach their children about their victories and their defeats. Kyle paused. But here is what truly makes them unique. They learn from their defeats. Every time they lose, they study what went wrong and ensure it never happens again. They have sayings about this. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The only true failure is the failure to learn from failure. He brought up the current tactical situation. The humans began this war with 60 ships. They have lost thousands, but they have also built thousands more. They began with primitive weapons. Now they use our own technology against us, improved beyond what we thought possible. They began fighting defensively. Now they attack our supply lines across dozens of systems. New information appeared, data that made several council members gasp. Their industrial production is now operating at levels we cannot match. They are building ships faster than we can destroy them. They are training soldiers faster than we can kill them. And most frightening of all, they are not yet fighting at full capacity. What do you mean? Matriarch Seelan asked. I mean that humans are still showing restraint, Kale said. They have weapons they have not used. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, atomic weapons. They have the capacity to turn this into a war of total annihilation, and they have chosen not to. They are fighting a limited war, trying to convince us to leave. But if we continue, if we push them to the edge, they will use everything they have. He let that sink in. I have found references in their military documents to something called mutually assured destruction. It is a strategy where both sides have weapons so terrible that using them would destroy everyone. The humans developed this strategy during their Cold War period. They were willing to destroy their own planet rather than surrender to their enemies. That is who we are fighting, a species that would rather die than submit. Ambassador Velkoth finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What do you recommend? Immediate ceasefire, Kyle said firmly. Open negotiations. Offer reparations for the damage we have caused, and pray they are willing to accept peace. The vote was not even close. 794 species voted to authorize peace negotiations. Only 53 voted to continue the war. The council had finally learned its lesson, though the price had been terrible. The negotiations took place at a neutral station, far from both Earth and Council space. Captain Sarah Chen led the human delegation, chosen because she had fought in every major battle and understood both the human position and the Council's capabilities. Matriarch Seelan met her in the negotiation chamber, and for a long moment, the two simply looked at each other. One old leader who had made a terrible mistake. One young warrior who had paid the price for that mistake. We surrender, Seelan said simply. What are your terms? Chen pulled out a data tablet. First, immediate withdrawal of all Council forces from human space. Second, recognition of humanity as a sovereign species with full rights to our claimed territory. Third, reparations for the colonies you destroyed and the civilians you killed. Fourth, a promise of non-interference in human affairs for the next century. Seelan reviewed the